Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this week's Tuesday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and here's what we have for you this evening. On the day the Tshwane municipality switches off SARS and police headquarters, shopping centres and more hotels, the South African Local Government Association tells Parliament that it's fully behind the move. The actions are in line with a standing SALGA resolution that advocates for municipalities to urgently and aggressively enforce credit control management measures. The man who said that, SALGA's acting president, is my guest.
We have decided that the top priority for the next 6 months is going to be focusing on corruption.
National Director of Public Prosecutions Shamila Batoyi is once again appealing for patience, but vows the next 6 months will be different.
Honorable Mpiti, and withdraw first.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I withdraw the word Bamun. Bawik.
We end the show with a bit of drama and chaos that also ensued today in Parliament. The Watchdog starts now. The National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batoyi, has defended the criticism on the slow pace of prosecution of various serious crimes, including fraud and corruption by some politicians.
We also need to be bold and innovative in terms of how we get resources into the law enforcement space and the skills to be able to do what we need. Procurement processes are really slow in government. And so, in the NPA, we are certainly, and so South Africa doesn't have the money. We have a serious crisis with money. So in the NPA, we are certainly looking at being more innovative in terms of how we onboard resources, even looking at engaging with private sector, working through National Treasury, and also putting in place the required safeguards to ensure that the objectivity and the independence of the NPA is certainly not in any way compromised. We're also we've already sent to the DG of Justice, who, as you know, is still the accounting officer of the NPA, which presents its own challenges. But we've sent to the DG and the minister a very strong proposal to set up a donor oversight mechanism in order to ensure that there's proper oversight with regard to any donations that the NPA may receive, both in terms of skills or financial assistance, and which, as I said, in terms of financial assistance, which will go through National Treasury.
Shamila Batoyi there talking about alternative means of securing funding in order for the NPA to do the work we are all expecting it to do. Well, to help us make sense of some of the things that Batoyi had to say is Ntabiseng Tubazana from Tubazana Attorneys. Ntabiseng, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. What a pity that Zoom line can't hold, and we've had to settle for a telephone line. Now, from what we're told, or Parliament was told today, lack of personnel and financial resources is what stands in the way of the prosecutions we are expecting to happen.
Yes, that is 100% true. It was true even prior to the State Capture Commission having been established and the recommendations that are now with them. It was already a problem in NPA to finalize a lot of matters, to have the correct kind of skill set to deal with certain kinds of matters and all of that. So with Camilla suggesting that, there should be donations either by skilled expertise, basically that's human resources, I guess, and then we also financial aspects of it. It shows the dire state in which the NPA finds itself now, that on the brink of of basically falling apart. Now there is more work that comes as a result of the State Capture Commission recommendations and the skill set and requirements that are needed to investigate such matters and to also prosecute such matters. We really don't have within the country. And the state organization, which is the NPA, that needs to make sure that they have a airtight case, or at least a prima facie case, whereby we take it to court and it can continue. They need to make sure the investigations are so good that there is no way, or at least there is little avenue for us as defense attorneys to try and tear their cases apart.
In fact, Shamila Batoy reminding Parliament that for the NPA, they have to go beyond, a prima facie case to actually proving beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah, 100%. But before it gets there, once it's still on the desks of either the SPA, the SPP, or the DPPs, all of those, when they're looking at the case, there should be at least on paper sufficient evidence for the matter to be placed on the roll, so that by the time it gets into the trial phase, or rather not even trial phase, when we get to exchanging of documents, where I'm receiving the copy of the docket, they are confident enough that I, as a defense attorney, will have no other option but proceed to trial than rather trying to, deviate to other things like representations because this and that is lacking, or the chain evidence is broken, stuff like that. So at least at that stage, if they can get it to that stage, then it can go on to trial. So in order to get there, we need a whole lot of skilled people to make sure that all these investigations that are intricate can be dealt with thoroughly.
Perhaps to really underscore the skills issue, I mean, as many people who have been watching, whether it's the state capture inquiry or some of the cases that have become before the courts, and some of these people went to great lengths to really hide, their tracks. They used accountants and other skilled people to loot and plunder the resources of this country.
100%, and white-collar crimes, you rarely see them, being prosecuted in our country because it is not easy to find such evidence. There is one recently that is being tried where there are 6 accused persons. It is very rare that we see that in our country because the skill set doesn't exist. So we need to export all of that, whether it is within the private sector, people who have been dealing with this for years and years, or taking it out of the country itself and finding people who are experts in that area of work that can assist the NPA in order to secure a conviction. So like you just said, they use a lot of experts to try and hide their money, to try and hide their tracks. So we understand where they're coming from as the NPA with the lack of resources. I just think perhaps the nation is a little bit apprehensive when we deal with the issues of whether there will be bias or not.
Now, to help deal with the resources issue, one of the proposals is that there be funding from the private sector, where private sector players who are interested in promoting democracy and ensuring that these culprits are brought to book can then anonymously donate to a fund that Treasury would have to, and Parliament would have to help set up. And of course, that idea didn't go unchallenged, or at least questions were asked. One of the people who asked questions was EFF MP Veronica Mende, who asked about the perceived biases that would come with funding from the private sector.
That is correct. And if you remember, in 2019, Dr. Lamula had also said that NPA does need this kind of funding. So it's not like it's something new that comes to us, but it really, I don't think they found a way to try and implement it and avoid the issues of bias that may come with it. So maybe, like they said, appointing a body that will oversee the monies that come in. But now, how are we going to make sure that the money that comes in, we trace it back all the way to where it originates, to show that it doesn't come from somebody who can pull strings, or perhaps who is involved in one of the cases that are already on or probably going to be on the roll. I think that's going to be an intricate process in trying to make sure that the money that are donated into the trust account are indeed clean, for lack of a better term, where people are not affiliated with the money that are also being prosecuted.
But Toy, of course, did say to the committee that, or assure them at least, that they won't be biased, conflicted, or compromised in any way simply because they would have accepted money from corporate South Africa. Now, do we know how people in other jurisdictions sort of tend to approach something like this where it has happened?
Where it has happened, I recall reading in I think it is in Britain, where it was done with private. It was sort of like a private prosecution kind of situation, but it didn't fly in the sense that it didn't hold up the issue of bias, because Parliament also argued about it, that they still feel like the private sector will have too much control over prosecution, the way that our Parliament is already dealing with the apprehension of dealing with that. So in other spheres, it hasn't 100% worked out. What they rather do is work on the jury system to try and assist them in that regard. Remember, we don't have a jury system, so everything relies on the Department of Justice to sort it out, from the bench to the prosecutors, the dominis litis, and the court, and all of that. So I think maybe dealing their atmosphere in terms of the law is quite different to us. So they were able to sort of privatize it when it comes to the decision making, and perhaps sometimes in the jury system they have experts who can understand the situation that is currently happening in the courts. We don't have that luxury here. Everything begins and ends with the prosecutor and the presiding officer in court.
Now, what also came through, that meeting today was that it's not only the NPA that is seriously under-resourced, and so too are the Hawks, so too is the SIU. Of course, all of this is not new, but it gives South Africans very little hope that we're going to see a difference anytime soon, notwithstanding her optimism that within 6 months we should see the difference.
Yes. Well, when we look at the merger, so to speak, between private and government institutions in general, it actually works to an advantage that public systems work much easier and faster when private organizations take over, because they're not as overwhelmed with work or inundated with work versus when everything falls on the shoulders of government. Now, having said that, when you look at the Hawks and the SIUs, they could use private investigators and their expertise in what they've done to assist them in this work. I don't foresee that to be much of a conflict of interest, because all that's happening there is just investigations. But on the other hand, you could look at it in the sense that these private investigations probably are paid by certain individuals or companies that are probably the cause of action in the cases that we're looking at, and they might hide or see certain evidence and not be given to the NPA. So either way you look at it, there's bad sides to it and there's good sides to it. But at the end of the day, we do need help in getting these matters onto the roll.
Well, could that be the reason then that both the NPA and the SIU spoke about finalizing a memorandum of understanding, reviewing the working relationship between the two agencies? I was a bit confused there because I wasn't sure what it was going to achieve. I mean, if you have no people, you have no money, what is a memorandum of understanding? How is a memorandum of understanding going to help you?
So usually what happens is that the NPA tasks the SAPS to do the investigations, because remember, when we open cases, the first place that we go to is the police station to go open a docket, which ends up in the hands of the NPA. So the Hawks and the SIUs are not the first point of reference for any normal individual to start their case. Now, maybe the memorandum of understanding between the two parties will be using their expertise as people who are a little bit more experienced or skilled versus the SAPS, and then join hands in investigations that the SAPS doesn't have the arms to reach to, in order to try and expedite the investigations and trying to bring these cases as soon as possible to court. That could probably be the main avenue for having this memorandum. But when it comes to finances, both institutions are struggling. So perhaps bumming off each other's budgets and also expertise could assist in us seeing a change in terms of seeing the matters on the roll quicker rather than 2 years from now.
Now, we were told, Parliament was told today that the SIU had referred over 1,500 matters to the NPA, and only 41 cases had been prosecuted. Now, I'm looking at those numbers against Shamila Batoy's promise that in 6 months it's going to be a completely different ball game. Was not perhaps a bit overly optimistic?
I think so. I think I agree with you there. It's a little bit optimistic. Let's just look at the normal day-to-day running of a court. A prosecutor walks into court with about 50 dockets, and this is just in match court, district court and regional court. They walk with between 50 to about 60 dockets on a daily basis. Now, when you go to court, to the High Court rather, there's also a backlog of all the cases that are not finalized. If you look at the JSC interviews, not the Concord ones, the ones previous, there were so many judges that said that there was a few rather judges that sat there with matters that are not yet finalized in the High Court. That's how bad it is in our system, that matters are not getting finalized due to a lack of prosecutors that are available to actually prosecute these matters. They have such a shortage of staff and a shortage of expertise in terms of people who've done this work for long in order for them to understand how to prosecute. So I don't know if 6 months was a good idea to put out there, but we live in hope, I suppose. So we'll see how that works out.
Okay, I'm hoping we're going to be able to play a soundbite from Justice Minister Ronald Lamola a short while ago, speaking during the debate of the State of the Nation address about some of the things they are putting in place to help both the NPA and the SIU. I'm wondering, here bringing out all the stuff about what they need to do for them to be able to prosecute the resources issue and everything else that she said today, how much pressure is on her, given that, she's recently completed 3 years in the job, and by her own admission has very little to show for it.
It is a lot of pressure. Everybody is now looking to her because when she walked into the shoes, she had given an impression that she's going to make such a huge and significant change in the NPA, but we're not seeing it per se. But to be quite honest, to be fair to her rather, she has done quite a lot. She has done things that we were not able to see in the past few years. She's done a few changes here and there, but unfortunately for her, she doesn't have the financial backbone to assist her in this. If I read correctly, in 2019, they were only allocated 36 million, which is not enough to deal with the things that they need to do, especially with personnel, to deal with the workload that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. So as it is now, in these 3 years, she was not able to do the turnaround that she was hoping that she would have done in the 3 years. Of course, we can blame COVID as well, which became a huge factor. But she has a lot of pressure on her to try and turn around the situation.
Well, of course, her head of investigations recently left, and that too surely would have put a spanner in the works. Hermione's departure, that is.
Yes, indeed. I think she's still serving her notice, but either way, there needs to be a replacement who will be her assistant, because now the pressure now falls on her heavily, or more so now that she's gone. But perhaps they have somebody who's working there in the interim while they find somebody to replace her. But it does put a lot more work on her plate because division. So division of the work would be more of a help to her at this stage. But it is what it is right now.
Of course, I mean, add on top of that the fact that, there are lots of vacancies at the top echelons of the police. We also know, as a matter of fact, that the National Police Commissioner and the Minister of Police, don't see eye to eye. And these are some of the people that Shamila Batoy needs for her to be able to do what is required or expected of her.
Yes, we hope that they're able to, when it comes to the work, at least put their differences aside in order to execute the one goal that we are all interested in. But if they are not able to do that and not able to put their personal or even professional issues aside in order for them to focus on the goal of having these matters that are now recommended in the state capture to be prosecuted, then we're looking at a situation whereby all the requests and recommendations that Shamila is putting forth to Parliament may not even get to Treasury in order for her to get the help that she needs. So it will make her stuck in the same rut that she's been in for the past 3 years.
No, I mean, as a lawyer, I mean, help me with this one. Just going back to that, to the 1,000 matters that Parliament was told had been referred to the NPA, and of course, of that, only 14 cases having been prosecuted. Someone pointing out to me that a case can include 20 or more referrals in one.
So what happens in a normal case, once the docket hits the senior public prosecutor's desk or the DPP's desk, they need to first find out where it stands. So basically the statements of the witnesses and what evidence is required in order to eventually charge the accused in that matter. So if there are things that are missing, they write in the diary of each docket basically and instruct the IO to go and find this information or find that witness and all of those things. And when they come back, if it brings more questions than answers, then this can go on for quite some time before the matter actually is set down in court for either for the accused to appear as a first appearance. So that's why I'm assuming that there's a whole 1,000 or so dockets that are still not attended to because there's so much information that is missing and investigations cannot be done due to lack of witnesses. Some are probably late due to lack of expertise because we don't have them in the country and all of those things. There's various reasons why a docket will not be in court for trial as yet based on the evidence that has been acquired by the state at the time that it hits the desk of the senior public prosecutors.
So true as it might be that referrals don't equal to cases, it doesn't take away from the fact, and the fact being that the work facing the NPA is huge. In other words, Shamila Batoy has a mountain to climb.
She really does. It's a mammoth task that she's dealing with. And the more that the country cries that we need to see results, it puts even more pressure on her to try and sort out all these dockets that are sitting in her office and in the various offices across the nation, of course. So, I don't know how they are going to deal with all of this without any sort of donation, whether financially or expertise, but they are facing a huge, huge task ahead of them.
Okay, and that's where we're going to leave it. What a pity, once again, that we couldn't talk via Zoom. Tabiseng Tubazana from Tubazana attorneys helping us make sense of what happened in Parliament today. Shamila Batoy, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, talking about her challenges and what she hopes or intends to do about them. Now, if you're alarmed at what we've been seeing since the weekend, the Tswana municipality switching off hotels and government buildings that owe it electricity, well, your municipality, wherever you might be in the country, may soon come to you and do exactly the same. That's what we're talking about after this short ad break. Don't go away. Now, if you're alarmed at what we've been seeing since the weekend, the Tshwane municipality switching off hotels, government buildings, and shopping centers that owe it electricity bills, well, your municipality, wherever you might be in South Africa, may soon come for you. Today, Tshwane moved to disconnect SARS headquarters, the SAPS head office, shopping centers, and even more hotels. The South African Local Government Association, SALGA's acting president, told Parliament today that no one should be surprised.
Madam Speaker, resident engagements in the IGR space have largely focused on debts owed by municipalities to Eskom, water boards, and trading entities. Less attention and focus has been on municipal consumer debts, which amounted to 264.7 billion rand as at 30 September 2021, of which government debt constitutes approximately 19.6 billion rand, and households as the largest component constitutes approximately 186.6 billion rand. We remain concerned with the impact of this consumer debt on the financial sustainability of municipalities. The situation is further exacerbated by the reality that the current state of local government revenue, compared to the assumptions that underpin the financial model presented in the local government white paper, are not aligned. Both potential and actual revenue collected by municipalities fall far short of the assumptions in debt planning, implementation, management, and expenditure demands placed on local government were radically extended, whilst per capita revenue based to fund those demands was radically reduced. A significant number of municipalities will never come close to that target under the current fiscal framework. Madam Speaker, in the recent actions by the city of Tshwane to disconnect non-paying ratepayers comes at no surprise. These actions are in line with a standing SALGA resolution that advocates for municipalities to urgently and aggressively enforce credit control management measures. This, in our view, is to be done in two phases. Firstly, targeting properties and businesses through disconnection, and a second phase that includes rigorous analysis of the gross debt and restructured debts to see realistically collectible debts and those that could be considered for write-off or repeal as historical, uncollectible, not forgetting the installation of prepaid meters to mitigate against the raking up of excessive bills.
Well, Councilor De Vos joins me from Cape Town, where a few hours ago he gave that address that you just listened to. Good evening, Councillor. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and thanks to the listeners.
Well, tough talk there, but one wonders, I suppose, 264.7 billion against 19.6 billion that you are owed to government is a bit perhaps, disproportionate. But one wonders why it is difficult for the government of all people, to pay municipalities. Like today, SARS and, SAPS headquarters had to be switched off. Why is that? Have you ever been able to put a finger on that as people who talk in those intergovernmental forums?
No, thanks, Vuyo. Vuyo, it has been for some time that SALGA, on behalf of municipalities, has engaged in the IGRs to encourage government departments to pay on time. But this was, we are not charging interest in many of the government departments who are not paying us. So our pleas has been fallen on deaf ears. There has been a number of platforms created within government in the IGR forums where government commit and departments commit. In fact, in some provinces, the provincial treasuries are on our side in ensuring and pushing departments to pay. But it is not improving. And there is a number of excuses which are continuously raised. It is either a claim that the bills are not correct and there are disputes and so forth. Municipalities have been very patient because many of these facilities where it's not being paid for are facilities which are hosting innocent stakeholders like school children. Schools are not paying. You get hospitals which are not paying. I come from a municipality which you may know is Bayers Nodia Amalgamation, which I was the mayor then in the previous term. We had battles to get monies from departments. And we just decided to cut off. But it's very difficult to start cutting off a hospital when you know there's patients in there. We have tried all the avenues, and you can follow up for yourself. There's a number of structures which has been established, but it is continuously happening. Now,
Okay, we seem to be having a problem there with Councilor DeForce. He is the acting president of the South African Local Government Association. I know for a fact that in a couple of weeks' time, they are going to a General Assembly where some of the things that they have resolved on are going to be discussed, and a lot of which he actually spoke to this afternoon as he addressed that joint sitting of the two houses of Parliament. Now, one of the things you spoke about during your speech, Councillor, was how municipalities need to be financially resilient, and you keep being hammered, of course, often deservedly, because we know there's a lot wrong going on in the local government space, but no one can argue with you on the need for you to be financially resilient, and for government departments to pay you. That should be an obvious start.
Yes, Vuyo. Do you expect government to lead by example? Because it is embarrassing for us to want to force communities to put off their electricity, and government, which should act responsibly, is not doing the same. So we are emphasizing, yes, we know the consumer debt is the highest, but at least government should be leading by example, and they should pay on time. And we are not going to be apologetic. We have been very sympathetic. We don't want to switch off hospitals. We don't want to switch off schools, because those are innocent patients and school kids who should not be carrying the burden of the actions which may be taken. That's why we have opted to deal with the officers of these institutions which are not paying. When we are asked and said we must campaign that people should pay, I always raise it that it is not morally correct for us to want to go and campaign that communities campaign, and we in government, we are not paying. We have raised it strongly in this platform because we have thought it necessary to raise it now, because all our efforts on the other IGR platforms have not given the results, the results we are expecting.
Of course,
municipalities under the circumstances need those monies.
Of course, I mean, the bulk of this money you are owed, 264.7 billion in total, is by households and businesses. What is SALGA proposing, or what are your members proposing should be done?
The government is subsidizing most of our indigent communities. Now, the challenge there, in which we want to encourage our municipalities more, is to ensure that we register all those indigent communities who qualify for free basic services. Because what you find, Vuyo, is that most of them sometimes are not registered as indigents, and their bills are also accumulating. So we want to encourage municipalities to ensure that people who are indigent and who are getting services from the municipality must register on their indigent registers for the free basic services, which they are being subsidized by government. Because in some municipalities, when you are qualifying to be an indigent and you have accumulated debt, that is a way some municipalities then write off the debt you owe because of the fact that you are being indigent. What we also said in the speech, we must look into that debt. That is about 186.6 billion rand, except for those of government, which are sustaining. Businesses which are generating income, I see no reason why businesses should not be able to pay their services to the municipality. I think the people which we need to look into is that consumer component, where I do believe strongly, in most cases, many of those debts can be, some of those people may qualify for the indigent grants and free basic services, and should they be recorded correctly, municipalities will look into how to deal with the debt. But we have to look into the historicalness of some of these debt, some of these debt are old debt, and which may never be collectible by the government. So what we are advising is we should analyze the debt which is owed, that 186.6 billion, so that we can see what is collectible and what is not collectible. And then for those which will not be collectible, we should find a way how can we deal in writing the debt up, and then come up with strategies of how can we collect those which is collectible. In some cases, municipalities do incentivize consumers to pay off their debt, and maybe give even some kind of deductions when people are paying. So we had to look into that, but we have to first analyze it properly to see what is collectible and what is not collectible.
Of course, to strengthen a local government, you need a lot more than people, paying everyone from, households to businesses to government. It's also about you as councillors doing your work. It's about officials also doing their jobs. What have you resolved to do differently? And I'm asking this with the benefit of knowing that in a couple of weeks' time, you're all going to a National Assembly where you're going to debate and resolve on these issues. What are some of the things that have come through from the provinces about how you need to relook the way you are doing your jobs, the way you are ensuring that you play your oversight role, the way you are ensuring that officials do their jobs without interference from politicians?
Thank you. I think we are all just coming from an election where the community and the people were very clear about what are they expecting from the municipalities and how they would want to be governed at that local level. In the first place, we need to have stable municipalities. That should be a first priority. A stable municipality where there's political as well as administrative stability, competent people employed who are capable to do the job. That is a first prize, because where there's no stability between labor, administration and politicians, that municipality is doomed to fail. So the issue of appointments and appointing the correct people in the correct places with the necessary skills and capacity is something which can't be compromised. And the other matter is we want our councillors to be close in touch with communities, because many of the issues can be dealt with if we have campaigns locally and encouraging communities to tell them what is the decisions and make them part of the decision making. They will know what is the reasons to pay, but we need to be closer to the people. And I think the message has been very clear from communities. They feel that there's a distance between us and themselves. I was just last night visiting an area where people complain about the councillor immediately. I said, it's not even 3 months. It can't be. The only way is we must stay closely in touch with our communities. I'm talking now about us as councillors at the grassroots level. Keep the community informed about what are we doing in that council, and also communicate to them what is the expectation and what is it that their contribution is to make a municipality sustainable. Okay. And I think that's the emphasis.
Okay. Councillor, I've seriously run out of time, but I have to ask you this. Please, if you can answer it in 10 seconds. The Deputy Finance Minister, David Masondo, yesterday in Parliament, you probably would have heard him, taking issue with municipalities that are taking the Auditor General to court because the Auditor General would have made negative findings against him. Just your thoughts on that, very quickly?
I may not have been in the house then. I just arrived this morning, but I think we are living in a constitutional democracy. And
so they are within their rights.
Feel and aggrieved, they have the right to approach the courts, but we would not advise unnecessary expenditure on court cases rather than dealing with the issues raised by the Auditor General.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks very much for your time this evening. Councillor Dion de Vos, who is the acting president of the South African Local Government Association. He addressed Parliament today where he raised quite a number of issues. To that very last issue I spoke to him about now, let's welcome, I'm joined on the line by Jerry Cruz, who is from the Public Service Accountability Monitor. Good evening, and thank you very much for your time this evening, Mr. Cruz.
Good evening, Vuyo, to you and your viewers.
Just your thoughts on that very last point I raised with Councillor de Vos, the Deputy Finance Minister taking, issue with municipalities who, instead of correcting the wrongs, are hell-bent on spending more and more, ratepayers' money, challenging, the outcomes in court.
Yeah. Frankly, I think it's completely out of order. It again evidences municipalities who do not want to account and who are intent on evading their responsibilities and seeking to challenge the responsibilities of the Auditor General, which are required and mandated by the Constitution and the Public Audit Act, and is likely to result in further wastage of public funds. I suspect that the Office of the Auditor General will defend that matter, and I will follow the matter closely, and we find that kind of conduct. The tendency in municipalities is to ignore Auditor General findings, and for financial controls to remain weak and ineffective, and for services at those municipalities that habitually conduct themselves in that manner.
And to Councillor de Vos's retort that we live in a constitutional democracy, so anyone and everyone has a right to challenge things in court if they feel aggrieved.
Yes, we do live in a constitutional democracy, but we also have courts that are empowered to make costs orders against applicants that proceed to court and litigate matters either frivolously or vexatiously, and who the courts will rightly sanction if they are found to be wanting. So that is a potential outcome of this matter. But of course, it remains to be seen whether it will in fact be argued and what finding a court will make. But it certainly sends out the wrong message. Far too many municipalities fail to act adequately on Auditor General's findings. We have extended powers now given to the Auditor General's office to identify material irregularities and to, with the support of other law enforcement, to take action against serial offenders and to recover funds that have been wasted or where there has been fruitless and wasteful and unauthorized expenditure. So it's not surprising that there's some pushback here, and because there are many municipalities that cannot account for their funds, and there is of course serious allegations in many municipalities that require greater checks and balances, better oversight by municipal councillors, and far better performance by municipal managers and senior staff in those municipalities.
Just your thoughts on, one of the big stories of the past few days where, the Tshwane municipality switched off hotels, government buildings, shopping centers that owe them money. And SALGA's acting president telling Parliament today that no one should be surprised. If anything, this should be encouraged, and perhaps it's something that needs to happen across the country, because as part of accountability, they need to be financially and otherwise resilient.
Indeed. The Auditor General's Office's reports relating to local government have been sounding out warning signs regarding the non-payment by municipal debtors, and that this has significant impacts upon the viability of these municipalities to function. And of course, if a municipality doesn't have enough revenue to cover its expenditure and owes more money than it has, then creditors are likely to not be paid for services that they've been provided. Frontline services will be affected. So maintenance of public infrastructure, upgrading of water and sanitation, road maintenance goes out the window, because the money, first and foremost prioritizes the payment of staff, but it ultimately impacts upon the entire service envelope for a municipality. So these kinds of steps should be taken by more municipalities to pursue municipal debtors and to ensure that ultimately the municipality is run more efficiently and more effectively. Creditors are paid and frontline services are delivered. So that kind of a step that has been taken, there are countless other municipalities that should be far more robust in their efforts to recover debt, and of course to honor their commitments to creditors, and of course to communities across South Africa.
Jay Cruz, thanks very much for your time this evening. He is from the Public Service Accountability Monitor. Now we end the show with a bit of drama, chaos that also ensued today in Parliament. Take a look.
Honorable Mbiti has just said the ministers of the President Bamungu, and you have just ruled on an offensive language use in Parliament. Can Honorable Mbiti be made to withdraw that? Failing which, you apply Rule 14H of the Joint Rules. Thank you very much. Mamela ke sikala withdraw actually. That's not proper. Chief Whip of the opposition.
Hello, there we go. Not that I need the mic. Deputy Speaker,
yes.
There is absolutely nothing unparliamentary about using the word sour. In fact, it is a common phrase to say sour grapes. I have been called a white racist throughout the day today, and not one single point of order has been called on me being called a white racist, and I absolutely refuse to have my member have to withdraw the word sour. This is a debate, and people must know that in a political debate, we have the right to express opinion.
Kubeka Honorable Mbiti, and withdraw first. You have to withdraw first. If you do want to finish, right? So withdraw.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I withdraw the word Bamungu.
And that's our show for this evening. To join us again tomorrow night. Good night.